Doing well. You got such a great voice. You have a good microphone or something.
It must be the mic. Can't be
Or the
the
interviewee.
interviewee.
Yeah.
You're listening to Idea Charger Radio. Well, good day, Success Chargers, and welcome back. We're here at episode 38. We're going to talk about what it takes to really be a great learning facilitator. Sometimes people ask me, they say, "Hey, Cooksey, what do you do, man?" And I said, "Well, I work with organizations that want to build lasting, profitable client relationships." And they say, "Well, that's awesome. How do you do that?" And I said, "Well, we come in and we get to know your people and we find out what makes them tick and how they communicate, get them to understand themselves, understand how to work well together, and how to package that up in a way that really lets your clients and customers feel like they're getting a super amazing, incredible experience with you, to the extent that that experience means that they not only are having some need that they have that your company provides fulfilled, be it a product or a service, but they really have just built a relationship with you that allows you to continue to sell to them again and again and again." And they say, "Well, how do you do that?" And I said, "Well, a big component of that is the ongoing work that we do, where you get in the room and you teach." And I said, one of the things that's interesting, though, about what I do and what's different about adults, when adults learn, and maybe it's not so different. I've got a preschooler that lives in our house, and she kind of learns the same way. It's all about the experience of learning. So what we're going to do today, I've asked John Verdone, who works with a company that I have an affiliation with, DDI, Development Dimensions International, one of the world's leading organizations in leadership development, training and facilitation and executive assessment, and just so many layers to what they do. Been doing this for over 4 decades. Really smart people back at the home office, some good folks. I have the privilege of going out and delivering programs for them, and John's been doing this also with them for many, many years, and now has even an extended role that we'll talk a little bit about what he does. Really, we're going to unpack a recent study that John has been conducting over the last year and a half to 2 years to really understand what it is that makes a great facilitator. And he's also going to tie a great connection to what it is that you could be doing right now in your business that leverages facilitation skills. I mean, maybe you don't want to go be a training facilitator. Don't blame you. It's not easy. It's a tough job. It's something I love to do, but not everybody is cut out for that. But John is going to share with us a little bit of his insight on how you could leverage a lot of these same techniques, though, to build better connections with your customers and your prospects, and also within your own teams at work. So with that, here is John Verdone talking about facilitation. I hope you enjoy it.
I actually have been facilitating since forever, I guess. If you think about it, people start interacting with other folks right away. And all I did was figure out I wanted to do it in a little more organized fashion. So I majored in it in college, as a matter of fact. So they didn't have facilitation as a major, but they had speech communication as a major. And I thought, well, that's cool. I can do that. Well, that was a long time ago. I don't even know if they have the major anymore.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're here today with a friend and colleague of mine, John Verdone, and John is let me see if I get this right. You are a facilitator extraordinaire and guru of all things facilitation for DDI, which is Development Dimensions International. Did I get the title anywhere close to being right?
Absolutely. I had to increase the size of the business card a little bit to get that on there, but that's exactly right.
Some of the people listening today may not be familiar with the term facilitation. A lot of times you hear about a facilitator, their mind goes to maybe some sort of a mediation or some kind of a legal proceeding, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're looking at it from more of a learning and development type standpoint. Can you kind of unpack for us a little bit, what is a facilitator and what does a facilitator do?
Yeah, facilitation is, I think, a specialized kind of methodology or skill set or format for teaching things to other people. So if you picture the teachers that you've had in your life, whether those were high school teachers or college professors or even some seminars you've gone to, those kinds of things, where predominantly there was a person standing up in front who had specific expertise that you wanted, and they spent the majority of the time lecturing or talking to you. That's certainly a form of learning that happens out there. But facilitation is a form that has more interplay between the audience themselves and the person who's leading the session. And it's premised on the fact that when most people go to a workshop or a seminar or a learning event, they expect to learn as much from each other, from other participants in the workshop, as they do from the person that's in front of the room. And so once you accept that as a premise, now the role of the person in front is less me just giving you information, and more it's about asking questions and generating discussions and challenging the thinking of the learners that you have in front of you. And it's a lot more fun, both for the people in the audience and for those of us that find ourselves in front of the group. It kind of takes teaching to a whole nother level.
So that reminds me of a conversation that you and I had. It's probably 6 or 8 months back. We were having dinner in Oklahoma City, and we were talking about this after a day of you actually were auditing me as a facilitator to give me some feedback. Part of that conversation was really talking about the differences between that lecturer and the facilitator. And I think you started to unpack that a little bit and said, look, a facilitator is a little more interactive. They're more guiding a discussion. And I know that part of your role is to identify what are some of those competencies, what are some of the key elements that really help quantify in some way what makes a good facilitator.
It's one of the things that when I took responsibility within DDI, Development Dimensions International, for not only going out myself and facilitating groups, but working with some facilitators to help them become stronger and better at what they do. It really challenged me to think about, well, what's the difference between really good facilitators that I've seen or experienced and people who are good at it, but maybe aren't the very best. And so we did a research study. I kind of commissioned a study looking around the world, different cultures, different parts of the world, to answer that question. And the real question that I was trying to answer was, are facilitators born or are they made? Because I've spent a lot of time working with people to help them become better at facilitation. And yet, somewhere deep down inside, I said, you know what, there are some inherent characteristics that some people have. And so we did this study, and the facts are that the answer is a little bit of both. That there's some things that you're kind of born with. There's other things that you can learn if you think about working with a group to teach them something. There's things like really understanding the content. At a level of mastery that you can share it with other people. There is understanding about the audience, whether that's a large group of people or just a few, whoever that might be. There are communication skills, being able to talk articulately and get things across to others. Being able to build a relationship with the audience or the members of the audience, which we would kind of categorize under kind of building a level of trust that exists. Being engaging, being delivering and talking in a way that keeps and captures people's attention. All those things were skill sets that really people can learn, or if it doesn't come real naturally to them, that they can become stronger at. And then just a couple of things that we had more towards the other end of the spectrum was a certain level of self-confidence that people have, and the people who are really top-level people, you can throw them in front of the toughest audience in the world, regardless of kind of the size, and there's a certain self-confidence that they have that at times, if you're not careful, it can almost verge on arrogance, but obviously you have to monitor it not to move over into that area. But self-confidence, that tends to be something that's a little more of a personal characteristic. And the other one I'd mention is the ability to connect ideas together in your mind in ways that other people don't. So one of the characteristics that really great facilitators have is that they can, over a course of a half-hour period of time, someone in the audience might ask a question or make a comment, And as soon as they do, it reminds the facilitator of something that another participant said maybe 20 minutes ago, and it was on a different topic, but he or she sees a connection in those two things and can repeat that back now and bring that back to the participants, the audience, say, gosh, what you just said, isn't that interesting? That really connects with what, Joe said earlier today when he was talking about this, and then throw a question back out in a provocative way to the group. So a real, a mixture of things that are learned and that we can all become better at, and then, maybe a few things that are more kind of stuff that we're born at.
So with that in mind, John, the origin of this interview that we're conducting today really came about several months back when DDI put together a quick YouTube video. It was about 2.5 minutes, and really just asked the question, kind of, what is it you do for a living? Trying to ask actual facilitators to articulate that, right? To live out what you just spelled out for us in terms of the competencies that make a good facilitator. Let's take a listen. I'm going to do the audio portion of that here. Let's just take a listen to what that video was like.
I've been a trainer and a facilitator my entire lifetime, teaching classes, facilitating, coaching, but I struggle with one question. When people who don't know what we do for a living say, what is it you do? Do you tell them you're a teacher, or you tell them you're a trainer and they think you're, helping people at a gym in some way? And I've always had difficulty at trying to articulate it until I saw something that really made a difference. There's a show on television where people bring in stuff that's been passed down, heirlooms, and it's looked at by someone who's a specialist, an appraiser who can tell them what the value and what the history of that particular item is. Well, on this particular night, an older gentleman brought in a large blanket. And it was an Indian blanket. It didn't have diamonds and the different patches. Instead, it was broad stripes across it. The guy asks him about the story. He says, well, as long as I can remember, when I was growing up, my father had this folded just across the back of a chair. And, when he passed away, he gave it to me, and I've had it across the back of a chair as well. And then the appraiser turns to him and says, well, what you have here is a national treasure. When I saw it from a distance, I started to get nervous with excitement. On a good day, you got a $500,000 blanket. And the camera cuts back to this guy again. He goes, I had no idea that it was worth this. And it was right then that I knew that's who we are. We help other people see the intrinsic value in who they are. Or we help them see the value and worth in others, people that they manage, people that they work with. We do it by coaching, we do it by training, we do it by facilitating. We are the people who add value and worth to the lives of others. And if you ask me that question, that's the answer you're going to get from me.
John, you just before we played that audio, you mentioned that one of the things a great facilitator does is can find an example like what you just shared in that video about the gentleman with the blanket. It sounds like you were watching one of those PBS shows like Antique Roadshow or something, and you found a connection in that to what you do. How did that? I mean, did that really happen? Was that like an aha moment for you when that happened?
Yeah, it really did. It's interesting, but I think really good facilitators, another skill set that they have is using really vivid examples and analogies or storytelling to make a point. And if you look back in time over, in fact, take any religious text of that's out there. And I was raised in the Christian faith, so I was going to church when I was a kid growing up. But I was always amazed that when you looked at these religious texts, whenever anybody would go to the Messiah figure and ask him a question, the Messiah would never answer directly. I was like, come on, give him an answer. Would you believe sort of stuff? They would always, they would say, Messiah, what's the basis of truth, or what's the path to follow? And he would always respond with, a man was walking down the road, and you know, it would go off into this story, or what was called a parable. So
Right.
when I see something, I will immediately something clicks, and I go, oh, that's an example, or that's an analogy that I think will work. And in the clip you just saw, I had heard someone else kind of talking one time about a show where they did this kind of thing, like an Antiques Roadshow kind of show. And so I went to look at this clip. I'd heard about this clip, and I went to look at this clip just to see what it was. And the person who had described this clip it was talking about it in a completely different way. It was talking about the value and worth of people, and kind of looking at. When I saw it, it just like a light bulb went off, and I said, oh, that is exactly what I do. That's exactly what I do. When we, and anybody who does this, when we break it down, we're not the guy with the blanket in this case, right? We're the person who, kind of does the assessment and the evaluation and helps people see their worth, all right? And so when I have people come through my courses, when they come through, and I'm teaching, I focus on leadership development, at kind of middle and senior levels in organizations, and when they come through, it's a lot less the material that I'm teaching, a lot less about me and do they think I'm great in front of the group, and it's a lot more now about what are they here for, what are they struggling with, what are they trying to accomplish, and what can I do to help them take those next steps for themselves, to become stronger and better in whatever way that they want to, and how do I help them see, not be as tough on themselves as they're currently being. How do I help them to see kind of the intrinsic inherent worth in the effort that they make as a leader and kind of working with other folks? So it really was an eye opener for me, and I'm just glad I was able to kind of formulate some wording to it that that I was able to share it with some others, and others seem to get something out of it as well.
This is a job, John, that your heart really has to be in it. I think anybody who listens to this at one point or another, somewhere in their career, has probably gone to a training session, been in a classroom, been volunteered at an event where somebody's trying to bring them up to speed with, here's what we do, and that person just absolutely lacks those critical skills. They tend to tell you all the time what it is that they think you should do very prescriptively versus connecting with you. I mean, leadership development is all about, in a lot of ways, I always bring it back to connection. If you can't connect with the vision and the goals of your organization, if you can't connect back to what it is that the person that you work with needs, and if you can't meet other people where they are and then begin to, we'll stick with the religious theme here, shepherd them in the right direction. I mean, that's kind of what a facilitator does. It's like, I would imagine, John, you step in the room sometimes and you might have some key learning points for the day. But I would guess you've got to leave some room in there to address whatever the issue might be that you couldn't have anticipated that may show up from your audience. How do you deal with that when that occurs in the room?
Well, first of all, I love when that occurs in the room. I live for when that occurs in the room. To me, the worst sessions I go do are the ones that go according to plan.
Ooh, tell us more about that. I like it.
Well, if you think about it, you come in, if you're, in the world that we live in, you're right. I go in, I've got some obviously people have come for some skill training in a lot of cases. They've come to learn how to be a better coach, or how to be more of a strategic thinker, or more influential with other people. And I'm, I think I'm pretty good at what I do. I can certainly get us through the day from start to finish. But I'm when somebody finally, raises their hand about 45 minutes in or an hour in, or somehow breaks into the conversation and says to me, John, this is a bunch of crap.
Okay.
I mean, I've been to these things I don't know how many times, and you come in here and you do this. This isn't how it works in real life in our company. Let me tell you about our company. And then they go in and our organization, and they really kind of dive into it, and it starts to get messy and ugly. And in my mind, what I'm saying to myself is, the workshop has begun finally. Right? That's I want it right there, because the only thing I want to do now is I want to be sure we're dealing with real issues that are in people's minds. And if they go through the whole day and or an hour or two or whatever you have with them, and they can never express the frustration or the joy or the anger or the feelings, or they can't ask questions that might be really stupid questions, or they can't do any of that stuff. If we're not getting to that level, then what am I doing there, right? I mean, we've got online stuff, right? This whole industry that we're in and probably for a lot of the people that listen to your podcast that spend time out with others. The technology's changing unbelievably. I always joke around that someday I'll have one of my grandchildren on my knee, and they'll go, "Grandpa, tell us again about how you used to fly out to where the people were and be in the room with them when you would teach them." Oh man, that has so old. I mean, this is a changing thing, but what hasn't changed is people, and that people want to get together with other people to learn stuff, and they want to be able to share, and they want to be able to be vulnerable, and they want to be able to have their telephones ring in the background while they're now the podcast begins.
Now it begins. That's
now that we're off, it begins.
You mentioned technology and how that's beginning to change the landscape of the learning development experience. Why is it so important that we still create a time and a space and a place to have these sort of instructor-led moments like you just described?
That's your best question, Scott.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, just if you want, I'll rate all your questions at the end of the session here.
I would expect no less.
Yeah, at the end of the podcast. And no, that's a great question. Because I don't know that we do, or I don't know that we will be protecting those spaces in a live format. So, and for me to say that is heresy, because that's how I make my living. And
sure, we both do.
I do certainly think there is something special about people being live together, and being able to turn and look at one another, and to read the kind of the feeling in the room, and whether it's okay in a safe environment to maybe disclose that they're not as strong at a particular skill as they, as other people believe, and they'd like some help or to get better or stronger at being able to do that. I think there's a place for that. And right now, that place, I think, can only be captured live. I do a lot of things over the web, as you do as well. Look at this podcast, right? It's a great podcast. It's very effective at what it does.
Oh, thank you.
We're able to have a good conversation back and forth. I think a pretty authentic conversation, but we haven't really mastered that yet for a larger group of people in that way. But who knows that we won't in the future? Perhaps as technology grows and becomes stronger and better, and maybe it's me and 20 holograms right in front of me, right? That are all there. So I fight hard not to be a stick in the mud, that we'll have to do things this way in that time, and hoping that we as facilitators and who draw people together live and see enormous value in that we'll be open to the technological changes that we can do. And when we do, it's going to be even better, because we'll be reducing travel time. I know you do the same thing I do in a lot of ways, which is, to get to that group of people. I'm typically flying for a full day, to get across the country.
Sure.
Staying in a hotel that night, doing, anywhere from, 4 to 8 hours with them the following day, getting back to the airport, flying back, getting home well after midnight. Maybe there'll be a quality of life increase, not only for us, but there's a lot of participants in workshops that are doing that as well. So I'm optimistic about technology. I'm optimistic about the future.
Yeah. Just this morning, I was on a call. It was actually a client call. So we had some people that were on the facilitation side, some people that were on the client side. And, there were 6 or 7 people on the call, and it was great. We got some good information, but you're right. There's something missing when you're not all sitting in the same room. You lose the body language, the eye contact, the unspoken communication between people that's like, oh yeah, I get you. I know where you're coming from, or that I have a question, or here was the intent. And, people talking over each other. So I think you're right. Technology's got a little ways to go. There's some neat platforms out there that are making that better. The important thing is that we don't stop the conversations.
Yeah, I worry about when the one part you've given those examples right there were terrific. And there are times what I haven't figured out how to do with technology yet. I mean, at some point I can, I'm sure, see them and see facial expressions. But there are times when I'm with a group of people and no one thing happens, but I just sense there's something wrong in the group. Yeah, I just get,
Sure.
I'll just stop sometimes and go, well, I'm just going to do a quick timeout. I'll turn to everybody and I go, what's going on here? What's is there something happening that I'm not picking up on or that somebody's not saying? That was there. I'll give you an example. I was with a group of people at an unnamed organization, and the organization had asked me to talk about and to build in their corporate values into the workshop. And so I was talking about the values and how important they were and how they tied into what we were doing today. But every time I brought up values, there was just this, I don't know, there was something in the room that was there. And finally I just stopped. I went, all right, somebody's got to tell me what's going on if we're going to, be able to continue with this. Someone's got to share how come every time I'm bringing up the values, why, how are the values seen or portrayed here? What's your sense of the values? Complete silence. Nothing. Now when there's complete silence, nobody's answering. Now I really know that something's going on. I go, all right, I need one brave person to kind of jump in here. And the guy finally jumps in. He goes, I'll tell you. He goes, we have a senior executive at this company. He runs one of our divisions that everyone in this room knows. And not only does he not believe in the values, but his behavior is in opposition to those values, and no one does anything to stop him. So how important can these values be when one of our most important senior people isn't held accountable for the same thing? And in my head, I went, say it along with me, the workshop begins now, right?
Yeah, right.
But and I wouldn't have picked that. Right now, technology-wise, I wouldn't have picked that up. Yeah, I wouldn't have. I couldn't have done that in the room. So I'm an optimist about technology, but it's out there a ways. It's going to take more development in that area before we can start to read those kind of cues.
Well, I thought it was interesting, and I loved your idea. You're looking far enough in the future. You're envisioning, little holograms, and in my brain, I saw, 28 people standing on my desk here in my home office, and that was kind of.
I told you to not drink this early in the morning, Scott.
Exactly right. That's just generally bad practice. I am a couple of time zones ahead of you though, so at least
you're right. That's exactly right.
It's noon here.
You're okay.
So let me ask you this, John. You've done a nice job of painting the picture for us about really two different skill sets. There's, what you saw as, I would say maybe those technical, tactical things you can learn, like storytelling, and how to construct it. But there's the other piece that's that intangible piece. So often I see people that get wrapped around the axle going, what do I do? I want to do what you do. They think it sounds really sexy to spend 100 nights in a hotel room in a year. It's not.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Let me just dispel that myth right now. It's not that sexy. But it's good.
Although it's clean, although your room is cleaner than you keep it in your apartment.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, what I love about a hotel is I mess up the place. I go out, I do my work for the day. When I come back, it all looks nice again. It's all clean again. But
it's kind of that's right.
That's one of the few pluses.
I mean, I do sleep on a lot of clean sheets, which is pretty amazing. There was a time that I worked for another company. I would speak in high schools for this other company, and sometimes they would put us in a place that fit the budget, but didn't quite fit maybe some safety standards.
Right.
And more than once I was in a hotel that I'm pretty sure you could have rented rooms by the hour.
Nice.
Yeah, not really pleasant experience. Fortunately, our clients treat us a little better than that because they know the importance of us being well rested and out there. This is a time where a lot of our listeners are looking at their own careers. Some of them work in an industry that's maybe going through a downturn or a gyration at this point, and they're thinking about what's their next step. Some people just want to play a bigger role within the organization. They recognize that if you can connect with others and facilitate great conversations, those are also traits that I think we look for in great leaders within organizations. And people want to enhance their skills. What would be your advice, at least for the part that you could go learn to get better at doing? Where do you see facilitators? What kind of backgrounds do you see that give people that opportunity to translate well into being a good facilitator?
Well, I'll answer the last part first and work my way back there. I see facilitation skills seem to exist in people regardless of what their background might be. So if you're out there, listening to this podcast, you're a leader in a particular industry, but you feel any kind of calling to help others learn or to teach others, I would just suggest that you go for it in a big time way. There's been research that shows, and it'll help you in your career too, regardless of what you choose to do. There's been research that shows that people who are viewed by others as good presenters, right, which facilitation kind of fits in a section of that category of presentation skills, that people with really good presentation skills, when others are asked about those people, they not only say that they're really good presenters, but they infer that they're good at all types of other things as well. So they view them as better leaders. They view them as better at different kind of skill sets. So it's a great skill to get stronger at, to get better at, and to work on, because I don't care what job you have. At some point, I mean, look, you could be working out in a manufacturing plant at some point, right? And you're a supervisor out there, and in the morning you're pulling in the 10 people that are on your crew, for the 15-minute morning meeting, and in that meeting, what are you going to do? You're going to spend the 15 minutes just kind of looking at your clipboard and kind of reading off the stuff for the day, or are you going to engage them a little bit and find out what questions they have and kind of work that way. So this can be used by anybody, and I would encourage you to get stronger and better at it. That's the good news.
Okay.
Right? Here's the bad news. The bad news is that there's no way to get better at this without doing this. Right. So you can read books on presentation skills. You can, on facilitation, you can go on the web. You can look it all up and see everything that's out there. That's great. That's going to give you intellectual understanding, intellectual knowledge about it. You'll understand it more. But I kind of view this, the parallel I give is I like to watch documentaries. And I like to watch stand-up comedians, when they're doing their acts. I don't usually laugh. This is kind of the weird thing. It's not for the joke, but I love to watch how they structure a set. What do they open with? How do they get from point A to point B? How do they link the jokes together? How do they riff with the audience? How to do all of those kinds of things. So I'm fascinated by that. And so there's different shows out there now that are comedians talking with other comedians about their craft. And what they talk about over and over again is all the time they spent bombing, right? When they were first out, they would go to the club and they would get up on stage at 2:30 in the morning with only 6 people left in the audience, by that time, and they would get up and they would try to do jokes and something wouldn't work, or a guy would heckle them and they wouldn't know how to handle it. But they just kept getting up there, and doing it over and over and over again until they finally developed that comfort level, developed the skill sets to be able to do it. And I think facilitation is the same way. What I would tell you is, or ask you to think about is, what is your opportunity to facilitate? Is it that 15-minute shift discussion at the beginning of the job? Do you need to participate in department meetings for wherever you are? Do you have an opportunity through your church or maybe a social group that you belong to lead a group, or to somehow get up in front of other groups that are out there? Could you volunteer someplace? Could you do work at the high school in front of kids? What is it? What opportunities do you have? And then take those. And I don't care how bad they are. Take them. What is your equivalent of the 2:30 a.m., 8 people in the audience at the club stand-up? What is your opportunity for that? Take that opportunity, get out there and do it. You're gonna do bad some number of times, but you're gonna learn from that. You're gonna become stronger. You're gonna become better, and it will help you. It will help you big time. Not only be a better facilitator, but a better leader, and just an all-around, I think, better person as well.
Wow, wise words. And you're right. There is no substitute for stage time and just doing it, right? And just being out there to make it happen. And we appreciate that. John, we're at the part of the interview where I like to kind of switch gears a minute and go into what we call the lightning round. So we've got 3 questions. The first 2 are around topics that I find to be somewhat, I don't know, some words that I think have been defined by some as being a little bit dangerous, a little bit, let's put it this way. They're usually more complicated answers than people anticipate. But I'm just going to throw the first 2 out there. The third one's going to be kind of fun. All we're looking for, just 20, 30 seconds, just kind of what comes to your mind. But John Verdone, what does success mean to you?
Really? That's a lightning question? You ask a deep philosophical question, and that's a lightning question.
You see what I did there?
So I do see what you did there. So success to me is living up, me personally, spending my life doing the best job I can, living up to what I think is right and the values that I hold dear. And facilitation, that really tests me because I have to do all of that in front of an audience, which is tough. I guess that's how I'd answer that question.
All right. So let's take a slightly different dangerous question and say, what is happiness?
Happiness, I don't like happiness to start with. So
okay, I told you it was controversial.
I'll go a different way. What I'm looking for is meaning in life.
Ooh, I like that.
I want to do things that are meaningful, and I think sometimes in pursuing happiness, that can take us in directions that conflict with spending my life in a meaningful way. So if I can, I'm going to send a different lightning bolt back to you, Scott, and say meaning is what we should be shooting for, not happiness.
I think that's awesome. All right, so here's the third one, and this one's a little more fun. But John, let's say, and this would be hard because I know you're a people guy, but let's say you were sent for the rest of your days in a very serene location of your choosing, but it would be a place you'd be like on this desert island somewhere, not desert, deserted island, just you. And you're there for the rest of your life, and you've got the creature comforts, I guess, things you'd like. But here's the trick: you can only have one musical album with you to play out as your soundtrack for the rest of your days. What would be the album that you would pack?
I would take Joe Cocker's live album done in the early '70s. It was recorded out in San Bernardino, I don't remember the name of the album. It might be, but he does With a Little Help from My Friends.
Yeah.
He does just classic stuff, and he does it live. Joe Cocker is my all-time favorite artist. Your podcast listeners may be too young to even remember him. He passed away just a couple years ago.
He did.
But gravelly voice, just a visual delight to look at. And I could live if I could only pick one, man. I'd live the rest of my time on that. And I hope you take us out of this podcast with some Joe Cocker music, my friend.
Well, we may have to try to do that and hope that we don't get caught. So
good point. Yeah, excellent point.
But if you want to sing it, John, we could do it.
I would, but I would only sing on a deserted island with no one around, and that is for the happiness of everyone else
right.
in the world as well.
So what would you do if John sang out of key? Would you
stand
up and walk out?
Yeah,
anyway,
that's
we go, it's one of the most soulful versions of that song, though, I think I've ever heard. The Beatles version is kind of, Beatles pop kind of a version, but man, when you're right, when Joe Cocker, I mean, he brings down the house. What a great version of that song. It's fantastic. John Verdone with DDI. John, thanks for your time and being with us today. We really appreciate having you on the show.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Yeah, I've got this same photo you've got. Have you ever seen my looking out the plane
No.
photograph? I think you've stolen mine. I think you saw it on Facebook and you've stolen my.
Well, you're better looking than I am, John.
Looking out the plane. Actually, we just need to gray up your hair a little bit.
I think we got it.
And you will be in terrific shape. Yeah.
I'm just call me Junior.
It's like a father-son photo. I'll send it to you. We'll put them together.
And that's how the conversation got weird.